Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissack and Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana, how are you?
I'm doing good. I see you're in Ohio.
Yeah, you see my pet buffalo back there?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Kate asked me if I was going to get a pirate to sit on the buffalo, and I said, nah, I think buffalo's enough. One stuffed buffalo in your office is plenty.
I love it. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so good.
Too funny.
I feel like I didn't even get to see you hardly at all. It was such a blur last week.
I know. It was really a blur for me. There were so many people I did not get to see or even that were there that just, I don't know. I think everybody was just busy and it was quick and in and out. And I had to leave early. So I didn't get to be there the last day. So it was just like crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Oh, you missed my favorite guy, which we'll talk about him. Maybe I'll do some of his next time. My favorite guy was exactly what to say.
No, I saw him. I had to leave right after him.
Okay, good.
Yes,
Okay.
he was my favorite too.
Oh, yeah. I want to just go devour all of his material. There's just not enough time. I mean, all this work is in the way of all of our learning we need to do.
I know. It's very, very true. I know. I'm dying to. I haven't yet, but I'm going to order his books. I want to order all three of those ones that he said. He was so great. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So today we're going to kind of hit the highlights from the CEO Summit. And then part 2 of this episode will be us talking about the mega agent part. And maybe we'll include the exactly what to say guy. On that one. Awesome.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because the CEO Summit, I feel like, is not something that everybody goes to or has the opportunity to attend. And this year there were some fantastic speakers. It was just so good.
Yeah, it really was. And a lot of it really spoke to me. One of the first things that jumped out to me was Tony Dicello's challenge them, then one person will do it or might do it. That was huge for me because as a leader of people, sometimes I feel like I don't put the bar high enough. And I know that Gary's really good at this because he's done it to me before, or telling me I probably can't do something. That's another one that works. But when Tony said that, I realized I'm not challenging enough people, because if I challenge enough people, and what he was talking about was he was challenging them to take 100 listings or something in a certain period of time. And he said one of his coaching clients did it.
Laura Gillot. Yeah.
So here's the deal. If you're not challenging anybody, nobody's going to do it. If you just throw the challenge out there, somebody's going to do it. And I thought, wow, that's huge. I think I need to challenge my people more.
Yeah.
For their benefit more than anything, right?
Yeah, well, because the thing that was so great about that, and I've heard him tell that story so many times, and we had, you know what, we've played a recording of Laura Gillot, and she was the one who took the challenge. But the thing that I was thinking about that too is at the same time that he did that, he also taught them all to think so much bigger, because not only were they up for the challenge, but also some of them, they weren't even thinking, like they never even thought 100 listings were. I mean, it was never even a thought. It was too big of a thought. They never even thought it on their own. And that's one thing I love about Tony. And anytime we can listen to him is just because he does make you think bigger. And one of the things that he said that I wrote down that I loved so much was, he said, so many people are freaking out right now. Then he said, but at the end of the day, all you need to think about is just, you need enough leads to meet your goal. Like stop trying to think about all these things that you need to do and all the different ways that you need to be able to do them. He said, you just need to figure out how many leads to get and how to get those leads to meet your goal, and stop freaking out about everything else. And I was like, man, that's like very simply put. And then I liked how he talked about too, the new lead gen. I kept hearing this was a theme like throughout this year. I felt like was just, we always say that it's a relationship based business, but he said, don't call and ask about buying or selling. Ask them about their life, because the people that are willing to trade a lower rate for a higher rate are ones that are making an emotional move. Yeah. They're having a baby, they're getting divorced, they had a death, they're getting married, whatever it is. And so he said, you need to be talking life conversations, not like interest rates, buying, selling conversations. And I felt like I heard so many people just say that in a maybe the same thing in a different way. Yeah. But that was a big one from him.
Yeah, I love both of those. And it's so true. We get caught up in the rates went up and and oh my gosh, the market shrank and all those things, and none of that matters. And I used to ask agents this all the time when they were freaking out. I'd say, okay, well, how many deals were done this month? And they'd tell me the number. And I'd say, okay, well, what was your goal? And their goal is nowhere near the total number. I said, then what's the problem? Right?
Yeah.
Enough deals were done. You just didn't do enough of them. You have to figure out how to do your part of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved Molly Bloom. I had seen the movie, but I had
Molly's Game.
Yeah, I love the movie. But one of the things that she said that stuck out to me is the problem isn't inside the inside voice that we have, which by the way, we all have it, right?
Yeah.
It's that we listen to it.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. Yep. She was so good. And I liked when she said, her story is incredible, by the way. Like, yeah, she got in trouble, or whatever, but she built a huge business. I mean, the largest, most prominent poker game in the world she was running. And that takes some skill. And I love that she said that the way that she did it was she learned how to make people feel good. Mm-hmm. And she said all she did was build relationships. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's what our business is all about too. So I love that she said that. And then the two other things I took from her, I took a ton from her, but were, this one kind of touched me. Those who refuse to take a risk after a bad loss always lose the game. Mm. And I thought, man, like how often do we have a bad failure or a setback and we get risk adverse again, then we're like, oh crap, well now we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that. And she said, everybody who refuses to take a big risk after a bad loss loses the game. And then she said, those who don't take calculated risks also lose the game. Mm-hmm. So you can't just be like willy-nilly with your risk. You have to be calculated about it, but you can't say, well, I'm never going to take the risk or you don't ever win. And I was like, gosh, there's so many ways that relates to business.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that becomes so true is one of the things that she said is we learn in the fire. So really, I've always said the people that get kicked in the gut, the value is in what you learn and you go and do differently from that point on, right? But you're right. Some people get fear adverse and they just kind of stay stuck because they don't want to get burned again. But we actually learn in the fire.
Yeah.
We learn from the things that don't go well much better than the things that do. You kind of get caught up in like she did a little bit when she was winning. You get caught up in the winning and you're not looking for what you need to learn or do. I love that she said effective presence when she's
I wrote that down too.
I thought she talked about a book, but I didn't ever I didn't see in my notes where I wrote the book. So
she said she studied effective presence. So I don't know if that was a book. I forgot to go back and look that up, but I have it highlighted and circled right here to go do it.
I love this also. She said, when people have been doing something the same way for 20 years, there's room for improvement.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And, she also said ultimately what came to her like demise was she did start making some judgment calls that were like out of integrity or, she kind of let the greed get to her or whatever. But, I liked what she said. No matter who you are, at some point, the people around you and the world you live in will win and take over. And I thought, that's such a good lesson for just who you're around, because ultimately, she had it all. Remember, she said she had $9 million cash in the bank, and that was ended up what they seized, all of that. But the reason was because she kind of let the people that were around her over, because she seemed to have pretty strong values and integrity. But the people that she was around, after being around them day in, day out for so long, she kind of folded into their ways instead of, the opposite, or her being able to stay in stronger. And it ultimately was what kind of made everything come crashing down. So just a good reminder that who you're around always matters.
Yeah, so true. And that made me think of something. I can't remember who said it, and I don't know where I wrote it down in my notebook, but somebody said something about, it's kind of like the humble, hungry, and smart. You look for integrity, intelligence, or something, and something else. But then,
oh man, I've got it somewhere. I'll find it as we're going through here.
If it's not integrity, you don't move forward at all,
no
matter what the efforts are. I don't remember who said that. Was it maybe?
I felt like it was Ryan Holiday.
Oh,
but now I can't remember. I don't know. I'll probably find it as we go through these notes.
Yeah. So anyway, that was big, and that's what made me think of that. You know what I've been looking for lately, Dana, is anything where there is an absolute, this came through with someone else's message. Like, like, okay, how have I heard this more than once? Okay, now I've heard it 3 times from these 3 amazing people. there's probably a lot of truth to this. This one needs to be a solid component that I live by, right? So I'm kind of looking for different things like that when I did that. Probably my one of the things she said also is people, and I think this is important it ties into what Henry Cloud said about track records. She said people have a tough time for seeing you for what you're doing. They see you for what your past is. And I thought about Henry Cloud talking about how important your track record is, because if you're telling somebody you're going to do this, but your track record says you've never done that, that's going to cause a red flag and people not to trust you.
Yep. There was a lot of parallels. You texted me and said this when we were in the summit, and that was so true. A lot of this stuff came back to what Dr. Henry Cloud was talking about.
Yeah.
We're like, man, he's really onto something, because so much of this stuff came back to that. It was just interesting.
Well, he and Dan Sullivan have both said every bit of their material has come from experiences with their clients and their people. Yeah. So I'm thinking, boy, what better learning field than people, watching people and seeing how they engage and the ideas that they come up with and the problems that they have and the the over and over same problems is what Henry Cloud said. Over and over, he kept seeing people not want to end a relationship. That's how Necessary Endings came about. Dan Sullivan, Who Not How, came from Dean Jackson. I mean, so I think that and one of the things, I can't remember who said it, but I think it was Grover, said, learn to listen, right? And I think we don't do enough listening. We're so worried about what we're going to say next that we don't spend enough time listening. And there's so many great nuggets around us if we just are in curiosity. And that's one of the things she said was the way she does effective presence is she's just curious about people. And
she said that she focused on the details, like the very details of every single one of her people.
Yeah. And I've noticed people that people admire and connect with better are people who are in genuine curiosity about them.
Yeah.
Right? That's not something you can fake. You have to learn you have to master the skill to do that.
It was Phil Jones that talked about the listening that you said that's who it was, because he talked about asking questions. And remember, he gave the example of how people say, wow, really? Wow, really? And he said, really, you're saying, when you say those things, you're saying, keep going, but I'm not really listening.
Yeah. That reminded me of my mug that's in my office. That says, say, that's crazy 3 times. Let's wrap this story up.
Yeah.
Listen, some of these are going to be harder for me to learn.
Yeah, same. I know. Well, okay. So moving on to Tim Grover, I probably had the most notes from Tim Grover if I had of anybody. Tim Grover wrote the book Relentless, and then recently his book Winning, which Gary Keller said I think was his favorite book of the year that he read so far. Okay. And then so Tim Grover was coach to Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, and I don't even know who else. So many people. Kobe. Yeah, Kobe. The starting thing that I mean, I have so many notes from him, but I highlighted just a few. But the starting one for me was, I was so glad to hear this. I needed to hear this. But he said, people are either interested or they're obsessed. And interested is a hobby. Yeah. He said, interested is a hobby. And in these days and times, you have to be obsessed. And he said, just like Michael Jordan was obsessed, Kobe was obsessed. He said, just like Jeff Bezos is obsessed with, shipping packages, anything you want across the world. And Tom Brady, they're obsessed. And he said, a lot of people start obsessed, and then you get some success, and or you like things get a little hard, and then you become interested, but you have to continue to be obsessed. Mm-hmm. And I thought, God, that's so freaking true.
It is. And to think there has to be only a few things in life that you could be obsessed with enough to win at a high level. And if I really think about, it goes back to what I've learned from Dan Sullivan about unique ability and different things. This is such an important issue of picking something that you can be obsessed about, not just interested in, because I'm interested in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But have only ever won big when I was obsessed with something. So that might have been my favorite takeaway from the whole event.
It was so good. Well, and he said there's nothing normal about winning, and there's nothing normal about success. Like if you're interested, then you're just interested. But if you are obsessed, you take it into everything that you do. He also talked about there's a lot of distractions today that take us from obsessed to interested. And I thought that was really true. Another thing that I loved that sometimes I used to be, I've gotten better at this, but I used to be more like this. But he said, winners and successful people don't let anybody else dictate their thoughts and emotions or something that happened yesterday. He said, you're carrying someone else's weight with you when you do that. You elevate yourself when you come into a space where you control you, not someone else, controlling your thought or even someone else motivating you. Like, I love that he said, like, they didn't need motivation. Michael Jordan didn't need motivation.
Well,
Tim Grover. Yeah.
That was my big takeaway. Was I leaned over to Press and I said, "Do you know what what his big success was related to? He didn't start with people that weren't already successful mindset. He didn't start with some nobody and bring them to the top. He started with the top and took them even farther."
Yep, he totally did. And actually you just made me think of, I didn't have this in my notes, but one of the things that I loved that he said was, someone asked, maybe Gary at the end asked him how how did you get Michael Jordan? Like, how did you get him as your client? And do you remember what he said? He said he wrote 14 handwritten letters to all the players on the team, but he didn't write one to Jordan because he thought he was, already being coached by the best or whatever. And then all those other guys, no one reached out to Tim Grover, but they were talking about that they received the letters in the locker room. And Jordan actually had his people reach out because he said, this part I did write down. He said, because the individuals that are the best of the best are always looking to get better.
Yeah.
Jordan was looking to he was always looking to get better. So even though Grover didn't really, have the guts to send the letter to Michael Jordan because he was always looking to get better, he reached out to him.
Well, and I thought, how many times as agents do we let our limiting beliefs say, oh, they'll never do that, or that's not going to happen, and not send a letter, because it could have gone the other way. You could have not sent him a letter and gotten Michael Jordan.
Yep, totally.
So he listened to that inside voice instead of saying, well, what the heck have I got to lose? Let's send, 15 letters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I wrote down, back to the obsessed and interested, I wrote, recruiting talent has to become my obsession, which I love doing anyway. But, I got to do it to the obsessive level, because the first two things that Gary wrote on mistakes that entrepreneurs make is not always looking for talent and then not hiring killers.
That's true.
And I'm thinking, okay, Linda, you're sitting here. Are you really obsessed? Because yes, I love it and I love when I'm doing it, but how am I making sure I'm obsessed and doing it more and more? Because every issue, every event, everything I ever go to, the one thing I always write down is I've got to do more of that.
Yep. Yeah. Do you think it goes back to what he said though about how, because let's just say, because you and I both were obsessed with that. And then we get in a good spot. And so we coast for a minute and then we're like, oh crap, but we need more talented people. You know what I mean? And then you get obsessed with it again, instead of those people are obsessed all the time. Like Jordan missing 9 Christmases in a row with his family because he played basketball on Christmas Day. He was obsessed, but he sacrificed that so that his family didn't, you know what I mean? It's he was just obsessed all the time.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've been reading books and stuff. I read a book yesterday on organization for ADHD people. I feel like sometimes I just get lost in my ADHD, and because I love new ideas and new things, I tend to get, I think for me, it's the how. It's like what Sullivan says, when it's your unique ability, me doing that is my unique ability. What's not my unique ability is getting all the appointments lined up, putting it on my calendar, getting everything else off my calendar. So it's a who. It's a missing who, because if I had 10 appointments tomorrow, all talking to talented people on the phone, I'd knock them out and I'd have the best day ever. Right?
Totally.
So it's not that. It's the how that makes us all not do the things that will get us the most success.
That is so true. That is so true. Because we would. It's the how of getting it set up.
Yeah. And that's the part we're not good at. And so all I got to really ask myself is, who's the who that will do the how so that I can be obsessed with the thing that I'm obsessed with anyway, but it's
Yeah.
not showing up in my calendar. I always think about Gary asking me, well, let's pull out your calendar and let's look, because the calendar doesn't lie.
Right.
What you put on your calendar, well, first of all, ends up in your results. And if you're not getting the
Yeah.
results you want in any area of your life, all you gotta do is go back and look at your calendar, right?
Yeah.
I was trying to think. Oh, I was listening to something. Oh, I was listening to this great thing on the airplane last night. Here you go, ADHD. But I was listening to this thing on the airplane last night. It's so good. It's called Beyond Losing Weight. Yes, it was the only thing on my Prime Video that was actually downloaded, but it was so good. And he talks about, it's really just about disciplines and habits. Anything in the
Yeah.
world we want is only about disciplines and habits. And I thought that is so true. If you
Yeah.
can figure out how to make it a discipline and a habit, you're going to get the results you want. But 9
Yeah.
times out of 10, we do have disciplines and habits. They're just not the ones that support what we say we want.
Yeah. If Adam were here, he would be like screaming amen in the background, because he is so disciplined and habitual with every single, to the point that I'm like, good grief, should you have one day where you don't, like, you know what I mean? I'm like, is it too much? But then I came after we left there, he was like, see, I'm just obsessed. I was like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
But
that leads me to, I'm getting ready to teach Unique Ability for the Leadership Academy tomorrow. And I
yeah,
was listening to some of Dan's stuff. And, one of the things that he talked about is knowing yourself so well that he knows that he can't be creative after noon. So
yeah,
he fills in space and room. And I do think you and I are both guilty of not having enough space in our day, right?
totally. Yeah,
But I also need a little bit of a structure. Like I need to see what's on a calendar to show up for the stuff that's there.
yeah,
But he talked about how he knows himself well enough. He gets up pretty early, and his creative time is early. And so
yeah,
he learned how to structure his schedule in such a way that he capitalizes on that. But there's room that just allows for, because I don't want to be so rigid and structured that I don't have 10 minutes, right? I want
mhm,
that room and that space. But I have to really think through, okay, what do I have to get off my plate to make that happen? Or who do I need to
yeah.
put in charge of the calendar so that that happens?
Well, so the next thing I had highlighted is just that Tim Grover said, winners require more balance, and you don't find it, you create it.
Mm,
And that really hit me, because I feel like everybody's like, oh, I want to have a balanced life, or, oh, I'm living at an unbalanced life. And I've even been guilty of that sometimes too. But when he said you don't find it, you create it, I feel like for years I've been looking to find it
yeah,
instead of actually creating that. And I think the way you create the balance is with your calendar and
yeah,
making sure that you have the space in there to do the things that you want, because he said the same thing is true with success or happiness. You don't find it, you create it. And so I think the more that a lot of it all boils down to the calendar. Now that I'm like back in the swing of things after trying to be after the last 3 weeks. I told Terry today, like, I've got to get back to my calendar, because it's just, everything feels like it's spiraling when
yeah.
I'm not. And it's just the worst feeling, when you get to that. But
And the question you have to ask is, how could I have had that space to take care of my dad's responsibilities
right.
and not feel like I'm now so far behind? To
Yeah.
me, that's the greater lesson. The greater lesson is, where's the space in your life for unexpecteds?
Yeah. It is the hugest lesson. And it's so funny, because owning multiple businesses, I've been able to see the ones that are totally fine and haven't missed a beat, and the ones that have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we talked about today. It's very eye-opening. You know what I mean? When you have a life's unexpected and you're out for 3 weeks and, doing nothing. It's just, yeah, there's a ton of lessons in it, which my favorite takeaway from Tim, I think, was this next thing that goes with this. And he said, interested people manage time versus obsessed people manage focus.
Mm,
And I think
mm,
even though we have stuff calendared and it's all about the
mhm.
time, for me, it's like, okay, I might live by my calendar to the minute, but are those the things that I need to be focusing on? Because obsessed people manage their focus. They don't manage their time. And that's, I was just like, oh my gosh, that was worth like my whole entire ticket to the whole entire day.
Mhm.
Um, because that's just so true. You have to manage your focus.
Yeah. Wow.
And, he also said, if you have a team, which most, a lot of people do, and a lot of our listeners do, whether they have a staff or a real estate team or a team of, one person that they manage, he said, you have to have one where everyone is obsessed with winning, but in different ways. Like everybody on the team has to be obsessed with winning. And that was one of the things we came back and talked about in one of our offices was, I don't know that everyone on one of these teams is obsessed with winning. I think a lot of them are okay with just, average, or let's just be normal or average. And when you're a leader who wants to really win and you want to be obsessed, you really have to have a whole team that's obsessed with winning.
Well, and I think about what Dan Sullivan says. I think part of being obsessed is when you're doing things that are in your unique ability. If you think about Jordan and Colby and all them, they weren't doing everything.
Right.
They were only doing their lane, their unique ability, and everybody else was taking care of everything else around them. They had lots of people around them to take care of all the other things. So I think part of it too always comes back to, one, are we in our unique ability? Two, do we have our people in their unique ability? Right.
Yeah.
Because when they're doing too many things, and I'm very guilty of this, of being under leveraged instead of over leveraged. Right.
Yeah.
Then I think it is harder to put a winning team together.
Yeah. Well, he said that Michael Jordan said something about obsession, and he said, I can't remember what he referenced, but I wrote down what he said afterwards, but I don't remember the example. But he said obsession to him meant you weren't thinking about other things. You were in the zone all the time, giving it your all the time. And everybody else was thinking about the other stuff that they were supposed to be thinking about, but you were in the zone.
Well, we saw that with John Maxwell.
Yes,
I mean,
totally.
how many times is there? I mean, even I remember being in Israel and the whole world falling apart, and John's still just doing what he's doing, and I mean, the team around him is like scurrying. Oh my gosh, we've got this coach thing coming up, and what's happening over in the United States, and Lord, what are we going to do? All these coaches are flying in, and the whole world's shutting down. But not John. John's just right in his lane, just calm as he could be. And I'm like, man, there's a lot to learn from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think the last thing I had from Tim Grover, I mean, I had so much. Gosh, we could do a whole episode on him, but he talked about the difference between having friends and having allies, because he said Michael Jordan would have been the best without him as a coach. He said, my job was to keep him injury-free in the body and in the mind. And so he said, therefore, I told him what he needed to hear. And he's not what he wanted to hear. And he said that the difference is friends will tell you what you want to hear, but a true ally will tell you what you need to hear when you need to hear it. And I just thought that was so good, because that's true. I mean, Michael Jordan would have been the greatest of all time without Tim Grover, but he really was his ally.
So true. I think we had Press and Anna's little girls. And this is so true. Kids will do it too. But we were at this place called Kidzania, which is like a city for kids. There's only so many in the countries, different countries, only one in the U.S. But anyway, it was so fun. It was like a city, and the kids got to be, veterinarian or fireman. And
where was that?
It's in Dallas. It's so cool. It's so
that's so cool.
But anyway, I'm directing because we're short on time. We're trying to get the next thing. So I say something to Jimmy in my direct way that I do say things sometimes, all the time. And Amelia goes, Mimi, say it nicely. You're so right, Amelia. And I'm like, oh, yes, out of the mouths of babes, right? Because I don't even notice, because I'm so intense about where we're going, or that we got to be there in 5 minutes because it's about that next thing is about to start or whatever. And I'm like, geez, that's so true. But you need more people like that, right? It wasn't fun. I didn't like it at all in the moment. But it's so
better it came from Amelia than Jimmy.
So true. No, he probably wouldn't have said it as near as nicely, but he will say, have you eaten lately, or what's going on? Hungry? Your hair dirty? I mean, what's going on?
Gosh. Okay, this is a total squirrel, but I have to tell you this funny story, because now this made me remember it. When you said directing, on the flight on the way back home from Austin, a girl, of course, we left a little early because I wasn't going to go. And then I was like, no, I'm going to have FOMO and I want to go. And Adam's like, everybody's going to talk about your dad. You don't need to go. And I was like, no, I'm going to go, but you're going to go with me. So Adam got a ticket at the last minute. So he came, and it was great. Like, I'm glad I went. It was good to see everybody. I learned so much. But then after the Phil Jones guy, I don't know, I just kind of hit a wall, and I was like, I'm ready to go. I'm leaving. We're just going to leave early, and we're going to change our flight and go home. So I was exhausted, and I just was mentally kind of exhausted. And on the flight, I was like, I'm just gonna I'm not gonna listen to to a podcast. I'm not gonna look through my notes and type them all up and do everything I normally would do. I'm just gonna try to watch a movie or just chill for a minute on the flight. Well, of course, the one time that I do that, there's a medical emergency on the flight. This girl, Linda, is walking. I'm the first and whatever were, sold out because we booked our tickets at the last minute. So we're in row 11 or 12 right there. And there's a girl walking to go to the bathroom right by our aisle. She passes out and just hits the floor, and her head hits the thing right next to me. I'm right here on the end, or I'm in the middle. There's a guy on the end, there's Adam, and she just cold hits the floor. So all these people, are looking, staring. Well, I'm like, is she dead? What is she okay? So I'm reaching over this guy that's on the end, this big old guy. And I'm trying to see if she's breathing. So then the flight attendant comes up and she's like, is anybody a nurse? Is anybody a doctor? Nope. Nobody on the whole plane. Yeah. So I'm like, well, shit, I'm going to have to take over. So literally, I'm like, so she kind of comes to, and she's got her hands over her head, and I'm like, can you hear me talking? And she's shaking her head, and I'm like, do you know your name? And she said her name, and I'm like, do you know where you are? And she's like, yeah, and I'm like, have you eaten? Have you drank alcohol? And she's kind of shaking her head over. So after probably 15 minutes, I finally kind of get her to sit up. I've medically diagnosed with dehydration and a vertigo attack. People are like, who is this chick? And so I give her, I'm like, oh, I have an elemental, let's give you some hydration packet really fast and down the water. I'm like, I have Vicks. Should we put Vicks on your temples? Because Vicks cures everything for me. So I'm trying to get her situated. So then she gets all, this goes on for 30 minutes. So she's fine. And I think she really was dehydrated, honestly. And she stood up and the plane was moving. And I think she just got dizzy and passed out.
Yeah.
So I look at Adam, I'm like, well, so much for my relaxing flight, because I just had to totally direct and take over. And he's like, I'm so glad you were here. He's watching, Yellowstone, just it's normal, chilling.
Gosh.
So then we get off, and they call medical people, and they come on and get her off, whenever we land. And she gets off, and I'm leaving, and she's like, hey, thanks for the hydration packet and talking me through it. She's like, I don't know what I would have done if you weren't on the plane.
And you go, there you go. Another point made of why me being a director is very important no matter where I am.
Oh, true. And then I'm not even kidding. We walk into the Delta Lounge because we had a layover. As soon as we're checking and scanning our thing, this lady comes running in and she's like, somebody call 911. An old man just passed out. And I'm like, I'm out. No more medical emergencies for me.
Above my directorship. That is in the doctor category, and I'm out.
Totally 100%. Yes. But it made me laugh so hard. And actually, Adam said, you and Linda, you all, he's like, you all are always good in a situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things, I can't remember who said it, but successful people are always highly responsible, whether they're responsible or not. It's okay, somebody's got to do something. And if nobody's moving, move. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, this chick's just laying in there and nobody's doing anything. Everybody's got their earpods in.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, it was wild. Well, let's see real quick. Ryan Holiday. I love him. He's so smart. He's almost too smart for me.
Yeah, me too. But I think I'm gonna have to hear him multiple times.
Yeah.
I got more from him this time, which I think we're going to be out of time. So we'll have to maybe do 3 episodes. Who knows? But, I think, yes, I need to hear him multiple times because he is very philosophy based.
Yeah, he is.
It was very good. And I think hearing him multiple times, and I think I'm going to go back and read some of his books.
He wrote The Obstacle in the Way, and I think he has a new book that just came out. The biggest thing that I kind of took away from him, just plainly put this time, was he said, obviously we're going into, a shift in the real estate industry, and most places, not all places, but most places are seeing a significant decrease, and things change. But he said in that there's always, in an area of opportunity, there's always opportunity to just practice more virtues. And, I never think about that stuff, I guess. Yeah. And so it was kind of a cool reminder just to listen to the virtues that he described and and kind of think about how I could have more of those in my life instead of just go, go, go all the time.
Yeah, I agree. We'll have to do a section just on him.
Yeah. Yeah. He was really good. Oh, that's what it was about. How we turn obstacles upside down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he said like success is not conditional on those things, but the people that have those things manage to avoid more spirals than the others. And I thought, okay, that's probably very true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So true. Awesome. All right. Well, Dana, I will see you next week, and we'll continue part 2 series of all of our takeaways and how they apply and what we learned from them from Mega Camp. And also we'll pick up the last speaker, which was the author of Phil Jones, who wrote Exactly What to Say, which is an amazing book. So if you have not, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if the greatest compliment you can give Dana and I, besides a great review, it would be for you to pass this podcast along to anyone that you think that would benefit from these types of conversations. And if you have a challenge, an opportunity, or a question, or a guest that you think would be good on the podcast, reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. So Dana, I'll see you next week.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.